everyone, and welcome to another episode of Policy Central, your one-stop destination to everything policy. Today, we on our panel we have Dr. Itishri Patnaik. She is a professor here at MAPP Department of Professional Studies in Christ University, and we have Isha. She is my classmate, and we both are students of MA Public Policy here in Christ University. And today's podcast, we'll discuss about gender budgeting and the various aspects of gender budgeting. So I'd like to ask ma'am to start the podcast and speak about gender budgeting.
Good morning. Thank you, Palak, and thank you, Isha. Before we go detail about what gender budgeting is all about, let's take example. For example, that government has come up with a new program for the job creation, and that program is anyway gender neutral. Anyone can go and work there. Okay, there is nothing like that the male will go or the female will go, but the point is that at the end government found out there are more male members there in the job place, okay, where it was been given, and less number of women member. Why so? Why so? When we try to dig into and try to get the answer of that, we found out is that is mainly because though the program is gender neutral, it's not restricting to any particular gender, but there are other linked issues are not being covered up. In the sense, there is no bus facility given to commute properly to that place. There was no creche facility given for the young women who can actually keep their child and then work in the job place. There was no public toilet given so that women can use. So all these things that actually talks about the needs of different genders are different. So when we are talking about gender budgeting, we need to understand because the needs are different, the budget need to be made in such a way that it actually takes care of all the gender and takes care of all the needs. Now, when we break it up, we know that gender budget is about gender, as we all know. It's not sex. It's about anyone who is being discriminated. And budgeting or budget is simply providing allocation of resources, planning and allocation of resources. And when we say resources, we all know that in economics resources are limited. They are finite. Yeah. It's not unlimited. We know the first principle of economics. So once things are finite, and then how to allocate in such a way that it will actually take care of all the genders, all the needs, and the allocation should be made, as we all say, from the every aspect, from the planning and the implementation. So this is the basic idea about gender budget and how we can be more inclusive. So that's why we say gender budget is all about budget of equality. How we can be more inclusive when we are actually planning our resources.
That was really insightful, ma'am. But we would really like to know more about the processes of gender budgeting and how it works and the process that the committees or the government follows for that.
Yes, thank you, Palak. So the process for gender budgeting, it's normally works in 5 steps. First, we need to identify. Okay, identify means we need to understand when earlier in the last social security measures, for example, government has done, who are the beneficiary, who has actually gained. Okay, and that identification is very essential for us. Who has actually gained, who has taken the money or kind, whichever way government has given, who has taken that beneficiary, who is the major beneficiary of that particular program. Okay, first we need to identify and to understand. The whole problem in case of India, we don't have gender segregated data to talking about the beneficiaries for each project. That's one of the major problem. So however, being the first step, the second step, once we know, identify, then the second step is to plan. We need to plan then.
Yeah.
We need to plan in the sense how we will make the expenditure, in what way we need to make expenditure, and then we need to, once we do planning, we need to then implement that. Okay, how we need to implement that. So the third step is implementation of the expenditure. So once you implement and you spend some money, definitely government wants to monitor it. how it has been spent.
Yeah.
Okay, once the monitoring part, we need to evaluate how the program is actually helping. So these are five major steps for the process of gender budget, and through which government of India, uh, as we all know, by this time, by 2005 and 6 is the first gender budget initiated in our country. And then subsequently a lot of states by now have adopted this one. Every ministry must have a gender budget cell with them, which they will look into every policy in a gender lens, in a more of a equality way. For example, let me I think the first example I gave you, then if I tell you the next example, for example, the government need to think whether we will spend more money on roads or mall or infrastructure or bridge, or we need to spend actually money on education, on health, on
Yeah.
crèche, on making home for widows. So that decision government need to make.
Yeah.
So the resources need to be allocated. So we are not having too extra money for this. Rather, we want the money to be spent in equal way so that everybody will get the facility. So this is what the process of gender
Okay.
budget.
So now that we know the process of gender budgeting and what gender budgeting is all about, so I would really like to know, our audience to know, that what are the other socio-cultural impacts of gender budgeting that our society sees, and the social and cultural impacts that our society needs in today's time in the 21st century. So I would really like to know your thoughts on this, Isha.
First, I would like to point out why do we need gender budgeting?
Yeah.
Yeah,
True.
why we need gender budgeting? There is some sort of inequality exist in our society. That's why some sort of a gender budgeting is required. And firstly, we need to make sure that this gender budgeting is not a separate budgeting.
Yeah.
It's within the big
Existing
thing
budget,
budgeting.
yeah.
It's there. So providing budgeting for women, it's empowering them, and empowering is a very broad concept. It's not restricted to economic lens, but they have social psychological lens as well. Now we look at the social psychological lens. I conducted a research on Shakti scheme here. So I was talking about empowering women. If you look at the Shakti scheme that was launched in Karnataka, that free bus ride scheme, so it's an empowering scheme, and it is part of you. I can say it is a part of gender budgeting because it's specifically for women to
Yeah.
empower them. So according to the scheme objective, it was to ensure gender equality and to empower them financially. Mostly it was. However, when we look at the social outcomes of it, there were little nuances that was missed during when we evaluate any that sort of a policy. When women goes inside the bus, how the dynamics of a male conductor or a male passengers are there, how whether they have the women are empowered there to no, I won't say fight back, but have the there's equality between these three
Yeah.
groups. We have their male male conductors may shout to give their cards give your card, give your something, whatever it is. So how this authority comes, it's some sort of a culturally imposed authority still persisting historically, that backing the male conductors or even male passengers were passing out comments.
I guess this comes more of a thought from that, if the government is giving any benefit to a marginalized community or the community which has been discriminated for a very long period of time, the other communities who do not benefit from it or who have not been marginalized on that scale, they tend to pass comments on them and they think of the beneficiary community as a freeloader. But
Exactly.
it is not that they are being a
Yeah.
freeloader. It's a generous push from the government side to for the overall welfare and the universal welfare of a nation, and bringing up the marginalized communities, because until all the communities in a country live in harmony, have equal rights, not rights but equal benefits, and they live peacefully in a country, until then we cannot talk about economic development in its true sense. So I guess this is something really people need to know, that this is a myth about gender budgeting also, that people who like, if the government is doing gender budgeting, they are the women or the beneficiaries are getting freeloader or it's something like that. So since I'm talking about myths and stuff, I would really like to know, ma'am, more about the myths that exist about gender budgeting, and if someone who does not know about gender budgeting, if they hear the term gender budgeting, there might be a lot of myths that people form or assumptions. So I would like you to break the bubble of assumptions that people
Yeah.
might have in their minds about gender budgeting.
Yes, interesting point, Palakanisa. Is the point is that as you both indicated, that is, see, the whole outcome of this all these programs is to achieve equality in the society,
Yeah.
is to achieve social equality in the society. That is the larger goal for all of us. Now, to achieve that, what we can do is we'll have certain policies to do that. Now, these policies need some funding, so that is how the concept of gender budget came. Okay, so these are all tools to achieve the larger goal, which is
Yeah.
social equality. Now, when we are trying to, in the process of this, there are two. When we as Palak rightly said, that when we try to allocate fund for certain community, and then the whole concept of saying that who is just gaining out of it, or that gaining someone out of it is very visible for those who has never been discriminated. So that
Yeah.
power structure in the society, that gets actually, that is actually main thing, in the sense those who are powerful, they always thinks those who are been powerful, be it caste wise, be it economic wise, they always get the sense of not losing their power, societal powers, in that way. Now, as Palak saw, there are two basic myths that exist when it comes to
Yeah.
gender budgeting. First is gender budgeting is about women. It is not about women. It is about any gender, any community who has been discriminated
Yeah.
or depressed over the period of time. So it can include male, women, third gender, any other community, children, underprivileged children, anyone who are being discriminated over the
Yeah.
period of time. To give another example, for example, that we have actually discussed this one, that when, for example, children in the growing age, when they see women as the teacher, okay, in the
Yeah.
pre-primary level, so they always idolize that
Yeah.
this is the hero, okay. But because in India 90% of total pre-primary teacher are women,
Yeah.
so in that case, it's a gender unequal in other way. So we need to have more male
Faculties,
teachers,
more
faculties, so
teachers.
that
Yeah.
the child will also idolize
A
a male
male
as a
as a
hero.
teacher.
So
Yeah.
this is gender unequal in other way. So it is
Yeah.
not only for women. That is the
Yeah.
first and foremost thing we need to understand.
Understand. Yeah.
The second myth is that there is some extra money we require for gender budgeting. Absolutely not. There is no extra money that we require. Within that, for example, we have that one piece of cake, and that must be equally divided so that everybody will get the piece of the cake properly. One shouldn't get more, one shouldn't get more,
Yeah.
less. So in that way, for example, MGNRJ, Mahatma Gandhi Rural
Yeah.
Employment Guarantee Scheme. Under that, we know that, as I told you, we started with the very basic example, that so funds should be allocated in such a way that some fund will go for preparing a crèche, having a crèche nearby. Some fund will go having a toilet. Some fund will go for commute, and some fund will go for skill development of the
Yeah.
workers. So in that way, we need to divide our funds in that way. So that actually will happen until unless all the ministries and the department come together and have their collaboration among each other to actually distribute the funds in a equal way. So these are the main two myths that exist.
Okay.
When we say the name gender budgeting, people get scared and they see that it's only for women.
Okay, that was really myth buster for people to know what gender budgeting is and what gender budgeting is not. So now, Isha, like you were talking about Shakti scheme, which was launched in Karnataka for the women. So I would want to know that a lot of people thought of Shakti scheme as a free bus ride for women and all of that, but uh, can you please tell us a brief about how Shakti scheme is also about improving especially rural women's mobility, and how does it increase their chance to opportunities, especially like if women mobility is something which restricts women and other genders also from assessing different opportunities. So how is also about creating opportunities accessible to women, because even though
Yes.
opportunities are there, but the opportunities need to be accessible to women. Until they're able to access it, the opportunities are of no use. So how this should be there, that while giving opportunities, the accessibility point should be kept in mind.
Uh, Thanks for the question, Palav. I think when I was doing this work, the scheme, when I was like looking and interviewing people, so it's a very interesting point was raised. Like, obviously it has increased options for women because it's free bus ride and everybody's allowed
Yeah.
to use it. So people from all walks of life would be entering and using the buses. So options have increased, of course, in general for every woman, whether from urban and rural. However, when I interviewed some of the women from urban areas, they said that rural women, their presence have increased in the buses, especially with the two buses are used here in Karnataka, the Bangalore bus and the Karnataka bus.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in
BMTC and
and the KRCTC,
KSRTC,
yeah.
yes.
So the in both the buses, they witnessed that the women from rural areas, they have come and they have started using the bus more. So for them, they can now go to temples, to the marketplaces, or they can travel like this. So I think that has been very beneficial for them. Also, decision making is one of the very important part of empowerment.
Yeah.
It give a sense of independence and autonomy to women, whether how to make savings and to decide where to travel, how to travel as well. I think that has also helped the rural women. And it's my assumption, I would say, that it may have given some sort of employment opportunities or entrepreneurship opportunities, bringing their stuff in the sense of their artwork, their craftsmanship, or
Yeah.
anything to sell here in urban areas to get some sort of opportunities or
I
benefits.
think it might also have empowered them, like women who live in the rural areas who did not have mobility access.
Yeah.
Now they have, now since they have that because of Shakti scheme. Now I guess the number of female farmers or the female vegetable sellers and all
Yeah,
those small entrepreneurial
True.
things will also increase in the like we'll see
exactly.
more women participating in that and having empowerment or actually being financially independent, all of that. So uh, I guess Shakti scheme is one of the very good examples from Karnataka, as we see, because
Hmm.
Karnataka is one of the first, like one of the pioneering states to introduce gender budgeting, and Shakti scheme came recently, and it is still very relevant and very important in
Hmm.
today's time. So, ma'am, I would like our audience to really know more about any other scheme which exists and which is there, which people do not think is a like has a gender lens into it. But if we look it through a gender lens, it is very important and can be implemented in a more efficient manner, so that the most out of that scheme is reaped for people.
Yeah, interesting. So we have now, because a state government is really careful about environmental policies. So we have a lot of scheme on green energy and green energy sector has been a lot of money is being put on green energy sector. So their government has this target that 1 crores household in the rural area must have the solar panel in the rooftop.
Yeah.
Okay, so in that way we can have actually give priority to women headed household or destitute women household or divorcee women household or any disabled person household, so they will get some income out of it. If those groups will be given more priority, the first priority in the scheme, so they will have the solar panel set in their rooftop, so they will have some source of income. So that is one interesting way that we can think of. The second I think scheme is all about the smart agriculture and the smart village program that we are
Yeah.
thinking of. So they are this nano drone the government has actually come up with the new program, nano didi drone, nano
Okay.
drone didi, sorry, nano
Okay.
drone didi. Okay, so where the women of again those who are in the needy and those who really require, those who are in the lack of resources group can be given the priority to learn about the how to use it, and they can gain some income out of
Okay.
it. So the point is that these small schemes, okay, need to small or big schemes rather need to actually think of everything in a gender lens, so that we will have the scheme, we'll have the outcome, but along with that we'll have social equality in the
Yeah.
society. So
So, yeah, ma'am, also when I was reading about gender budgeting and stuff, one scheme which really was not perceived as gender budgeting, but when I read about it, I thought if we look at it through a gender lens, like what are the more outcomes of which we can see, like I'm talking about the Jal Jeevan mission,
yes,
like it is one of the very like new schemes that not new but it has been
yes,
there for some time, but people perceive it as it is about accessibility to water and better standard of living. But if we look at through a gender lens, like if we take examples from states where the droughts are very
yes,
often, like
prevalent, yeah.
Rajasthan, if we take example. So in Rajasthan, I not it particularly also in Rajasthan, I guess if something is not happening properly in a household, for example sanitation or the water, if any crisis is happening there, I guess the burden
So
automatically comes
on
falls
the
on the women of the household. So if we look, ma'am, can you please tell us about how can we look at Jal Jeevan Mission through a gender lens, and how is it helping women also of households who are homemakers, and how is it solving their problem of water as
yes,
well?
again, Jal Jeevan Mission is aimed to provide tap water
Yeah.
connectivity to every household by 2024. That's the aim. So this actually this scheme, which we really need to, there was no mention in the scheme about gender role. Okay, and also as we have already discussed, there is no extra money need
Yeah.
to be kept, but the allocation should be made, or the provisions should be made in such a way that the women can benefit. So while the scheme nowhere has mentioned the word gender or women in anywhere in the scheme elaboration, it's really essential that the women need to be given priority in a way that women headed household need to be given the priority, so the water connectivity need to be there. They are first in those household, because when women is not having any other help, and it's purely the women is actually is taking care of getting the water. So those households, okay, marginalized household, women headed household, women de facto headed household where the male has migrated and the women is taking care of the family, those households need to be given the priority, so that the water connectivity will come first to those households,
Yeah.
so that some sort of equality that we can actually also some regions, for example drought prone regions, how to make because in those regions, as we all know, in Rajasthan and all, women they need to walk more than 10
Yeah.
kilometers to fetch the water. So in those area also the priority should be given, so that while we will have water connectivity towards the end of 2024, along with having a social equality in the society. So
Yeah. So yeah, ma'am. Now that you told us about gender budgeting and Jal Jeevan Mission, we talked about, and you told about how is it about prioritizing what sector needs more uh, focus. So
focus on,
now I
yeah.
would really like to know how has gender budgeting. It's still very much evolving in Indian context. So and since we are talking now about like we are talking about India and gender budgeting, so I would really like to you to tell our audience that at towards the end of our podcast that what are the focus areas today, that what are the areas in which the country and the government, state government, central government, or both together need to focus, like what is there which needs, what is going to give women long term empowerment, or how is it going to be a long term benefit for them, not only short term,
Futuristic,
and
yeah.
what are the things which the women need in today's time, or gender focus should be there on those areas as well.
Yes, as we all know that the major focus till now on gender budgeting is mainly on infrastructure development, developing infrastructure, for example, having more street lights, where because we all know that women are more vulnerable when there is lack of street light in the road. So it's mainly on infrastructure development, mainly on education and skilling. So these are few of the area where the major emphasis on gender budgeting has still, which is really good, which is essential, and that's, so these are the first initial steps. But now, as we all know that we will need to also focus on mainly on care economy, because care economy is one of the evolving economy, and we are trying to understand, we have understood in certain way that the time spent on care activity by women is really huge. So we really need to now have some budget allocation towards care economy. That is one of the new priority area, and a lot of study are focusing on care economy and how to make it little bit more formalized or regularized. Formalized, so it will take a lot of time, but at least make it more regularized in certain way. So other thing I think we need to focus on, as I told, green energy. That is one of the sector that we need to focus on. Skilling, in a way, still the government is really doing good work when it comes to having budget on skill development activity. But that, how can we link that with the market? The one of the major problem is that the skilling is there, skill development activity we do, but how can we link that with a marketable way of skilling certain thing? And mudra scheme is one of the very we have, women can start their own startup, that also need to be focused on, and those type of skilling need to require, which actually link to through mudra scheme. We can channelize that through mudra scheme, and that will link to us to the marketing their products. So that is one thing. And the last, I think, need to focus on domestic violence issue. That is, I know a lot of people might think that this is not what budget we need to provide for this, but we need to, when we need to have and think in future that we'll have a gender equal society, this one area that we need to focus on, and certain budget need to be provided under this domestic violence, in the sense that when women want to come out of their house, where they will go, where they will, so rehabilitation centers need to be there, or shelter homes need to be made, so that then the skilling activity will work there, and then marketing will be challenged there. So these are the few areas that I think we still need to focus on, and still need to pay attention with.
Yeah.
I think I would like to
Yeah,
put
yeah,
this
yeah.
one
Go
thing.
on, Isha.
First of all, everything is fine, but we need to also question is who is making this budget as well. Like women are
Yeah.
being represented or
Yeah.
not.
Representation is very
Exactly,
important.
and women are being empowered to make their budget, because if women are not being placed to make their own budget, we can't recognize their needs or interests. So I think that is
Yeah.
one more thing I would like to
True.
point
Yeah,
out.
that's also a very important point to think that even if we
Yeah.
are talking about gender budgeting and everything, it is all about giving women, but we should also talk about how women should be in the position of giving, like more
True.
in decision making, because almost half of our Indian population is women, but the percentage of women representation in the decision making institutions is really very less, and it's high time that we see more of women representation and gendered equal representation. We should not only talk about men and women, we should say gendered equal representation should be there. Okay, so ma'am, since you talked about all we have talked about so many things, I would really like to know that since we live in a time of economics and market demand, and what the market needs and what the market demands, what market supply. So I would really like to know that, are we creating enough demand for gender budgeting? Because I guess until the market demands, there won't be supply. So are the women talking enough about gender budgeting, or is there a buzz about gender budgeting that people in power hear about, that this is today's need and this is what we want and we get?
This is actually a very larger question, Palak,
Yeah.
in the sense the demand, when we say that, we need to understand the society that we live in.
Yeah.
The society that we live in is mainly patriarchy in nature, where role of women is limited in different and various ways. So a lot of time, I think a lot of government they point out that, oh, we have given 500 rupees to every woman, and
Yeah.
that is what is we have done a lot about gender
Yeah.
budget. But that is not about that. Just giving certain amount of money once in a while, that is not about gender budgeting. We need to make it institutionalization or institutionalize in certain way. That means it should be our everyday practice. That we need to, there must have institutions who will be talking about all this thing, because see, maybe you and me are educated, so some way we can actually raise our concerns, but women in the rural India or women those who are less educated, they really need certain institution to fall back on. So
Yeah.
we really need to create institutions, okay, to actually make and facilitate women or any community who's been actually depressed or been actually discriminated over a period of time. So creating that institution itself is really important. So that's why then we need to have budget on social protection schemes,
Yeah.
more on social protection schemes, and also along with that, as we all know, we have a huge aging population also in India. So more on taking care of the old age people.
Old age
That so
people.
that also those kind of social protection schemes we need to make to actually have a larger implication or larger goal to achieve to.
Okay.
So this is my a short answer to your larger question, and
Yeah.
because you have put a really a lot a big question for us to think and
Yeah,
introspect to
I guess
us.
it's a very big question for our audience to also think about that. Are we creating enough buzz? Are we creating enough demand? So, with this, I would like to leave our audience with the question that are we creating enough demand for gender budgeting? And I would really like to thank Professor Itishri and Isha for joining us for today's session and signing off. Thank you, everyone.